Have you ever felt a strength within you, an indomitable force that makes you believe you can conquer anything? But what if, with that strength, came a flaw so deep, so all-consuming, that it threatened to undo everything you've ever accomplished? Would you recognize it before it's too late? Or would you, like Samson, fall prey to your own desires? Samson was no ordinary man, blessed with a strength beyond measure. He was destined to lead his people, to be a hero in a time of darkness. But like all heroes, Samson had his weaknesses. Weaknesses that would lead him into the arms of betrayal and bring him to his knees. Join me as we delve into the story of Samson, a man of unmatched strength, brought low by the very things he sought to control. In the ancient lands of Israel, during a time when the people were under the oppressive rule of the Philistines, there lived a man of unparalleled strength, a hero among his people, Samson. But as with all great heroes, Samson's life was marked by a fateful flaw that would lead to his tragic downfall. This is the story of Samson and Delilah, a tale of strength and seduction, of love and betrayal that has echoed through the ages. Samson's story begins not with his feats of strength, but with a divine encounter that foretold his extraordinary life. His parents, Manoah and his wife, were a devout couple who had long been childless. In a culture where children were seen as a blessing from God, their barrenness was a heavy burden. They prayed fervently, seeking a miracle. One day, as Manoah's wife was alone in the fields, an angel of the Lord appeared to her, radiant and awe-inspiring. "You are barren and have borne no children," the angel said, "but you shall conceive and bear a son. Now, therefore, be careful not to drink wine or strong drink, and do not eat anything unclean, for the child shall be a Nazirite to God from the womb to the day of his death." This divine encounter filled Manoah's wife with a mixture of fear and joy. When she told her husband, he too was struck by the gravity of the message. Together they prayed for guidance, and the angel returned confirming the prophecy. This child, Samson, was destined to begin the deliverance of Israel from the Philistines, a people who had tormented them for years. From his birth, Samson was set apart, a living symbol of God's power and promise. His parents raised him under the strict Nazirite vow, forbidding him from cutting his hair, drinking wine, or coming into contact with the dead. As he grew, it became clear that Samson was no ordinary child. His strength was unmatched, his spirit indomitable. Yet, with great power came great responsibility, and the seeds of his downfall were already being sown. As a young man, Samson was driven by a fierce sense of justice and an equally fierce temper. His early encounters with the Philistines were marked by violence and retribution. One of the most famous stories of his youth is the slaying of the lion. As he was traveling to Timnah to seek a Philistine wife against the wishes of his parents, a young lion came roaring towards him. Without hesitation, Samson seized the lion and tore it apart with his bare hands, as if it were nothing more than a young goat. This act was a sign of things to come, a glimpse into the formidable power that Samson possessed. Later, when Samson returned to Timnah to marry the Philistine woman, he found that bees had made honey in the carcass of the lion. He scooped out some of the honey and ate it, sharing it with his parents, but not telling them where it came from. This incident would later lead to a riddle at his wedding feast, a riddle that would spark a deadly conflict with the Philistines. At the feast, Samson challenged the Philistines with a riddle. Out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet. Unable to solve it, The Philistines coerced Samson's wife into revealing the answer by threatening her and her family. When they answered correctly, Samson was enraged. In his fury, he killed 30 Philistine men, taking their clothes to pay the wager, and stormed off in anger, leaving his wife behind. This act of violence was the beginning of a bloody vendetta between Samson and the Philistines. Each time they retaliated, Samson responded with even greater ferocity. He once captured 300 foxes, tied their tails together in pairs, attached torches to them, and set them loose in the Philistines' grain fields, vineyards, and olive groves, destroying their harvest. The Philistines, desperate to stop him, sent an army to capture Samson. But when they surrounded him at Lehi, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. He found the jawbone of a donkey and used it to kill 1,000 men. After the battle, exhausted and thirsty, Samson cried out to God, who miraculously provided water from a hollow place in the ground, reviving his strength. Samson's downfall, however, was not to come from the battlefield, but from his own heart. Despite his devotion to his people and his God, Samson had a weakness for Philistine women. He had already been entangled with one, but it was Delilah who had become his ultimate undoing. Delilah was a woman of striking beauty and cunning intellect, living in the Valley of Sorek. Little is known about her early life, but it is believed that she was a Philistine, perhaps of noble blood. Delilah was not just beautiful. She was ambitious, calculating, and she knew how to manipulate the desires of men to her advantage. When Samson entered her life, she saw an opportunity, a chance to secure wealth and power beyond her wildest dreams. The Philistine rulers, desperate to rid themselves of Samson, approached Delilah with a tempting offer. 100 pieces of silver from each of them if she could uncover the secret of Samson's strength. The weight of the silver, heavy enough to make any ordinary person waver, was light in Delilah's hands. She accepted the offer, her mind already spinning with a plan to ensnare the mighty Samson. Samson was smitten by Delilah from the moment they met. Her beauty, her charm, her allure, they were irresistible to him. But what Samson saw as love, Delilah saw as an opportunity. She played the role of the loving partner perfectly, earning his trust, slowly weaving herself into the fabric of his life. Delilah's charm was a weapon as deadly as any sword. "Tell me, my love," she would whisper, her voice a soft purr that sent shivers down Samson's spine. "What is the secret of your strength? How can you be bound so that you might be subdued?" She asked the question with a playful smile, as if it were a game. But underneath her laughter was a deadly seriousness. Samson, in his infatuation, teased her with false answers. "If they bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, I shall become weak like any other man," he said one night, smiling at her naivety. But Delilah was no fool. She reported his words to the Philistine rulers, who brought her the bowstrings. That night, as Samson slept, Delilah bound him and called the Philistines to ambush him. But when Samson awoke, he snapped the bowstrings as if they were nothing. Delilah, undeterred, tried again. "If they bind me with new ropes that have never been used, I shall become weak, like any other man." But when Delilah tried this trick, the ropes too snapped like threads. Frustration simmered beneath her calm exterior, but she pressed on, driven by the promise of wealth and power. "Perhaps," Samson mused one evening as they lay together under the stars, If you weave the 7 locks of my head with the web and fasten it with a pin, then I shall become weak." Delilah followed his instructions, her hands trembling slightly as she worked. But even then, when the Philistines came, Samson awoke and tore the loom apart. Delilah's frustration grew, and with it, her resolve. She was relentless, knowing that time was running out. She began to play on Samson's emotions, weaving a web of guilt and sorrow. "How can you say you love me when your heart is not with me?" she accused, her eyes filled with feigned hurt. "3 times you have mocked me, and have not told me where your great strength lies." Samson, wearied by her persistence and blinded by his love, finally gave in. He revealed the truth. "No razor has ever come upon my head, for I have been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. If I am shaven, then my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak, like any other man." That night, as Samson slept on her lap, Delilah called for a man to shave the 7 locks of his hair. The room was dimly lit, the air thick with tension. As the razor sliced through his hair, Samson's strength ebbed away, leaving him vulnerable, human. Delilah, feeling the weight of his betrayal, called for the Philistines, who seized Samson, gouged out his eyes, and bound him in bronze shackles. The mighty hero was led away in chains, reduced to grinding grain in the prison of Gaza. For Samson, the darkness was not just physical, it was spiritual. Blinded and humiliated, he was forced to confront the consequences of his actions. The man who had once been Israel's greatest hope was now a broken prisoner, mocked and scorned by his enemies. Yet, even in his despair, there remained a flicker of the old Samson, a remnant of the strength and faith that had defined his life. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Samson's hair began to grow back, a symbol of his slow, painful journey towards redemption. The Philistines, in their arrogance, failed to notice this subtle change, believing that they had completely destroyed their enemy. But Samson's strength was not merely in his hair. It was in his renewed faith, his understanding that his power came from God alone. The Philistines, unaware of Samson's growing strength, decided to bring him out during a festival to their god Dagon. The temple was filled with people, nobles and commoners alike, all eager to see the mighty Samson reduced to a mere spectacle. They laughed and jeered as he was brought out in chains, a shadow of the man he once was. But as Samson stood between the pillars of the temple, something stirred within him. He asked the servant who led him to place his hands on the pillars that supported the temple. "Let me feel the pillars on which the house rests, that I may lean against them," he said, his voice calm, almost resigned. The temple was packed with people, including all the lords of the Philistines, and on the roof about 3,000 men and women watched as Samson was paraded before them. Samson, feeling the weight of his past actions and the need for redemption, prayed one final prayer. "O Lord God, remember me, I pray. Strengthen me just this once, O God, that I may with one blow take vengeance on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." With all his might, Samson pushed against the pillars. The temple shook, the walls groaned, and before anyone could react, the entire structure came crashing down. The temple collapsed, killing Samson and thousands of Philistines in the process. In his death, Samson achieved what he had set out to do. He struck a devastating blow against the enemies of his people, and in doing so, he found redemption. The story of Samson and Delilah is one of the most compelling narratives in the Bible. It is a tale of love and betrayal, of strength and weakness, of a hero brought low by his own desires. Samson, despite his flaws, remains a symbol of faith and redemption, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, we can find strength in God. Delilah, on the other hand, serves as a cautionary figure, a symbol of how deceit and greed can lead to ruin. Together, their story continues to captivate and inspire, a timeless lesson in the power of love and the dangers of betrayal. Samson's legacy is complex. He was a man of extraordinary physical strength, yet his true strength lay in his faith and his willingness to seek redemption, even in his final moments. His story is a reminder that no matter how far we fall, there is always a path back to God, always a chance to find redemption. Delilah's story too offers lessons about the dangers of manipulation, the consequences of betrayal, and the ultimate emptiness of material gain when it comes at the cost of one's integrity. As we reflect on their story, we are reminded that strength is not just about physical power. It is about moral courage, about staying true to one's beliefs, and about finding the strength to rise even after the hardest falls. The tale of Samson and Delilah, with all its drama, intrigue, and tragedy, will forever be etched in the annals of history. A story as old as time and as relevant as ever.